The soft beeping of the heart monitors was the only constant in the Minneapolis General Hospital nursery that October night. Lauren Crawford adjusted her badge and once again checked the vital signs of little Ryan Matthews, a premature newborn of just 32 weeks. Her attentive eyes scanned the numbers on the monitor, while her experienced hands delicately adjusted the oxygen tube. It was then that he noticed something out of place. A small folded piece of paper, partially hidden under the incubator's clipboard. Lauren hesitated for a moment before picking it up, her heart racing inexplicably. 15 years of experience as the nursery's head nurse had taught her that anomalies rarely brought good news. Technician Jennifer is changing the medications. She replaces the prescribed drugs with cheaper generics and pockets the difference. I can't identify myself, but this has to stop. There are already too many babies at risk. Lauren felt the blood freeze in her veins. She reread the note 3 times, her hand shaking slightly. Jennifer Martinez was a nursing technician who had only been working at the hospital for 8 months. Quiet, efficient, always willing to work overtime. Characteristics that now took on a much darker meaning. "Lauren, is everything all right?" The voice of Marcus Chun, the pediatrician on duty, brought her back to reality. He was standing in the nursery doorway, a worried expression on his always serene Asian face. "Dr. Chun, we need to talk." Lauren tucked the note into her uniform pocket, then gestured for him to follow her to the doctor's room. On the way, her mind was already at work cataloging all the recent cases of babies who had shown unexpected reactions to medication. In the privacy of the room, Lauren shared the contents of the note with Marcus. The doctor listened in silence, his countenance becoming more serious with every word. "That would explain the atypical reactions we observed last month," Marcus said, running his hands through his gray hair. "The case of baby Wilson, for example. His response to the antibiotic was much slower than it should have been." Lauren nodded, remembering the case. "And little Amy Peterson, too? We thought it was just a question of dosage, but we need to proceed with caution," Marcus interrupted. "If that's true, we're dealing with something very serious. But we can't make accusations without concrete proof either." "I know someone who can help us," Lauren said, picking up her cell phone. "My sister Madeline is a detective with the Minneapolis police. She'll know how to proceed." As Lauren made the call, her memories returned to Jennifer. How could she not have noticed before? The extra shifts always coincided with drug deliveries. The excessive interest in keeping track of the pharmacy's stock. The long conversations with suppliers. Madeline Crawford arrived at the hospital in less than an hour, wearing civilian clothes so as not to attract attention. Her red hair, identical to her sister's, was tied up in a discreet bun. After hearing the full story, she began to formulate a plan. "We'll need hidden cameras," Madeline explained, "and access to the medication dispensing records for the last few months. We'll also need to keep Jennifer under discreet surveillance." "What about the babies?" Lauren asked, the concern evident in her voice. "Some of them are still receiving medication." "Let's do a full audit," Marcus suggested. "Review every prescription, every dose administered. But we need to do it without arousing suspicion." The 3 of them spent the next few hours developing a plan of action. Madeline quietly activated her team, while Lauren and Marcus began reviewing medical records, looking for suspicious patterns. "There's one more thing," Lauren said, when it was already past 3 in the morning. "Who left the note? It must be someone from the team, someone who witnessed something. Or someone who's involved and wants to get out of the scam," Madeline suggested. "I'll investigate all the nursery staff, but very carefully. If Jennifer realizes she's being investigated, she could destroy evidence or worse, do something desperate." As the sun began to rise, tinging the Minneapolis sky with shades of pink and orange, Lauren was exhausted but determined. She watched Jennifer arrive for her shift, smiling and greeting everyone as always. The technician stopped briefly at little Ryan's incubator, making notes on her clipboard. Lauren felt a tightness in her chest. How many babies had already been affected? How many tiny lives had been put at risk because of greed? As she watched Jennifer work, Lauren made a silent promise to each of the tiny patients in her care. The truth would come out, no matter what the cost. The plan was in motion. Cameras would be strategically installed later that day. Records would be analyzed. Staff would be discreetly questioned. It was a race against time, where every moment could mean the difference between life and death for Minneapolis General Hospital's most vulnerable babies. Lauren took another look at the nursery through the observation window. Ryan was sleeping peacefully in his incubator, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. She touched the pocket where she had kept the note, that little piece of paper that had triggered everything. The truth was about to come out, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same in the nursery at Minneapolis General Hospital. The installation of the hidden cameras in the nursery was completed before nightfall. Madeline Crawford, now officially in charge of the case, watched the makeshift monitors in the hospital's security room, accompanied by two experienced detectives from her team. The black and white images showed Jennifer Martinez going about her usual routine, apparently oblivious to the surveillance. "We need more than closed-circuit footage," said Richard Gomez, one of the detectives, adjusting his thick-frame glasses. "Have her financial records arrived yet?" "I just got them," Madeline replied, sliding her finger across the tablet screen. "Over the last 6 months, there have been regular deposits into her account that don't correspond to her hospital salary. Amounts of between $2,000 and $3,500 a month." Lauren entered the room carrying a stack of medical records. The dark circles under her eyes were a sign of a bad night's sleep, but her eyes remained alert. "I found something worrying. In the last 3 months, we've had a 40% increase in the number of babies requiring additional doses of medication or having unexpected adverse reactions." Dr. Marcus Chun, who had remained silent until then, stood up from his chair. "This coincides with the period when Jennifer started doing extra shifts in the nursery. She volunteered to help with the pharmacy's inventory. And that's not all," Lauren continued, spreading some documents out on the table. "I compared the invoices for the medicines received with the administration records. There are subtle but significant discrepancies. The numbers don't add up." Madeline picked up one of the documents, her trained eyes quickly spotting the patterns. "She must have a contact in the hospital pharmacy. There's no way she can do it herself." At that moment, the monitors showed Jennifer entering the medicine room. Everyone in the room leaned forward, watching intently. The technician checked the corridors before closing the door behind her. "Bingo," whispered Richard, zooming in on the camera. Jennifer removed some bottles from the shelves, replacing them with apparently identical ones. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who had done this many times before. "We need these vials," Madeline declared. "They're the physical evidence we need to confirm the tampering." "I can help with that," Marcus offered. "I'll do a surprise audit of the stock as soon as she leaves. It'll be suspicious if you go in there." Lauren watched the screen with a mixture of anger and sadness. How could someone do this to babies? Some of them are already so fragile. "Greed," replied Madeline, putting her hand on her sister's shoulder. "But we need more. Who is buying these drugs? Where's the money going?" The investigation took a new turn when Catherine Patel, a young pharmacist from the hospital, knocked on the door of the room. Her face showed anxiety. "Dr. Crawford," she called out to Lauren. "I think I know who left the note in the incubator." The group exchanged tense glances as Catherine entered the room, carefully closing the door behind her. "Angela Roberts, one of the nursery assistants," Catherine continued. "She came to me 2 weeks ago, concerned about some strange records she'd found. But before we could investigate further, she had an accident on the stairs in the parking lot." "Accident?" Madeline questioned, her police instincts sharp. "She's at County Hospital," Catherine explained. "Severe concussion, some broken ribs. She said she was pushed, but she didn't see who did it." Lauren felt a shiver run down her spine. The case was getting more serious than they had imagined. It wasn't just a question of adulterated medication. There was violence involved. "We need to talk to Angela," Madeline decided. "Richard, you and Sarah secure her in the hospital. I don't want any more accidents." On the monitors, Jennifer was coming out of the medicine room, her uniform as impeccable as ever. She stopped to check little Ryan's vital signs, making notes on her clipboard. "She's going to try to get rid of the evidence soon," Lauren observed. "She must have noticed that something is different. The nursery routine has changed since yesterday." "Then we need to act fast," Madeline concluded. "Dr. Chun, do your audit now." Catherine, I need you to document any discrepancies you find in the pharmacy system. Lauren, keep monitoring the babies closely. Any suspicious reactions, let me know immediately. The group dispersed, each with their own clear mission. Lauren stayed for a moment, watching the babies through the monitors. Each of them was so small, so vulnerable. The responsibility of protecting them weighed on her shoulders like never before. We'll get her, Madeline assured her, squeezing her sister's shoulder before leaving. And we'll figure out the whole scheme. Lauren nodded, determined. As she walked back to the nursery, her mind worked incessantly. Who else was involved? How long had this been going on? And, most importantly, how could more babies not be affected? The day went on, tense and full of expectations. Jennifer's every move was observed, every interaction documented. The truth was about to come out, but the price of discovery could be higher than any of them imagined. The visit to County Hospital revealed more than Madeline expected. Angela Roberts, the nursing assistant who had suffered the accident, was conscious but visibly shaken. Her brown eyes, surrounded by bruises, revealed a deep fear when she began to speak. "It wasn't just Jennifer," Angela whispered, adjusting herself uncomfortably on the hospital bed. "There's a bigger scheme. Dr. Raymond Pierce, director of the pharmacy department, is coordinating everything." Lauren, who had accompanied her sister on the visit, felt her stomach turn. Dr. Pierce was respected in the hospital, known for his efficient management and economy of resources. Now, that reputation was taking on a sinister meaning. "I found documents on his computer," Angela continued. "I was doing routine maintenance on the systems when I saw emails exchanged with a pharmaceutical company called MedTech Solutions. They supply generic drugs not approved by the FDA. Madeline made quick notes on her pad. "Is that why you left the note in the incubator?" "Yes," Angela replied, tears streaming down her bruised face. "I tried to talk to the hospital administration first, but I realized that some of them were also involved. Then, on the night of the accident, Dr. Pierce called me into his office." Angela's narrative was interrupted by an urgent message on Lauren's cell phone. It was Marcus. "Come to the nursery immediately. Ryan is having a severe reaction." "Go," Madeline ordered her sister. "I'll take care of things here." Lauren ran through the corridors of County Hospital to her car, her heart hammering in her chest. During the 15-minute drive to Minneapolis General, her mind was torn between worrying about Ryan and Angela's shocking revelations. In the nursery, she found Marcus and Catherine struggling to stabilize the baby. Jennifer was noticeably absent, blood pressure dropping. Marcus reported administering medication. The last dose of antibiotics was given 2 hours ago. Catherine held up an empty bottle. "I've just tested a sample of this batch. It's not just a cheaper generic, it's a complete fake. The concentration of the active ingredient is less than half of what's needed." Lauren quickly checked the other babies in the nursery. "We need to change all the medication now." While the team worked frantically to save Ryan and protect the other babies, Madeline continued her investigation at County Hospital. Angela revealed more details about the scheme. Dr. Pierce had established a complex network for supplying counterfeit drugs that stretched across several hospitals in the region. "The profits are divided among the participants," Angela explained. "Jennifer is just the tip of the iceberg. There are doctors, pharmacists, and administrators involved in at least 3 different hospitals." Madeline felt the weight of the investigation increase. "Who pushed you down the stairs, Angela?" "It was Mike Davidson, the head of security at Minneapolis General," she replied, shivering. "He's responsible for making sure no one interferes with the scheme." At Minneapolis General, Ryan's condition finally stabilized after an hour of intensive intervention. Lauren was watching the heart monitor, exhausted, when Madeline arrived with her team. "We have search warrants," the detective announced. "We're going to search this place. Lauren, I need you and Catherine to identify all the suspicious drugs." The operation unfolded quickly. Officers discreetly dressed as hospital staff began to circulate through the corridors. Dr. Pierce was arrested in his office, trying to delete files from his computer. Jennifer was found in the parking lot, about to flee with a briefcase full of documents. "We found something interesting in Dr. Pierce's office," Richard reported, showing Madeline a tablet. "Bank transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Millions of dollars over the last 2 years." Lauren, watching everything from the nursery door, felt a mixture of relief and horror. The scheme was being dismantled, but how many babies had been affected over the years? How many families would never know that their children had been given counterfeit drugs? Dr. Crawford? A soft voice called out. It was Rachel Matthews, little Ryan's mother. How is he? Lauren led the young mother to the incubator. He's a fighter, Rachel. We managed to reverse the reaction in time. But she hesitated, knowing she had to be honest. There was a problem with his medication. In fact, we're discovering a much bigger problem. While Lauren explained the situation as delicately as possible, Madeline coordinated the arrests. Mike Davidson tried to resist, but was quickly overpowered. Other employees involved were identified and arrested. Catherine turned up with more test results. We found adulterated drugs in every department, she reported. It wasn't just the babies. The whole hospital was affected. The night turned into dawn, and the extent of the scam continued to unfold. Madeline set up a temporary command room, where evidence was cataloged and statements taken. Lauren alternated between helping with the investigation and looking after the babies, making sure they all received the correct medication. How are we going to tell the other families? Lauren asked her sister during a brief pause. The hospital is setting up a task force, Madeline replied. Each case will be reviewed. Each family will be notified. But the most important thing now is to make sure this never happens again. The sun was beginning to rise when the last suspects were taken away by the police. Lauren watched the nursery, where Ryan and the other babies slept peacefully, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded. The truth had come out, but the work was far from over. The local media surrounded Minneapolis General Hospital the next morning. Lauren watched from her second-floor window as reporters flocked to the main entrance. Their cameras pointed at the building like guns ready to fire. The counterfeit drug scandal had exploded into the day's headlines. "I've just received the full results of the audit," Catherine said, entering the meeting room where Lauren and Madeline were reviewing documents. "We found adulteration in 67% of the stock of high-complexity drugs. MedTech Solutions supplied diluted or completely false versions of practically everything." Madeline was typing furiously on her laptop, coordinating teams in different hospitals in the region. "We just arrested 2 MedTech executives in Rochester. They tried to destroy servers with transaction records, but our technology team managed to recover most of the data." Lauren massaged her temples, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. "How are we going to identify all the patients affected? That's 2 years of records, hundreds of people." "The hospital administration is setting up a task force," replied Catherine. "We're cross-referencing medical records with batches of suspect drugs. But the most worrying cases are those like Ryan, patients who are still receiving treatment." Madeline's phone rang. After a brief conversation, her face became even more serious. "Angela Roberts has just suffered an attempted break-in her room at County Hospital. The suspect fled, but the security cameras captured images. They're trying to silence her," Lauren concluded, feeling a chill. "We need to transfer her to a safe place." "I've already arranged it," Madeline assured her. "But it shows that there are still people involved that we haven't identified. Dr. Pierce may have more accomplices than we realized." A knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Marcus Chun, looking more tired than ever. "We need to talk about something serious. I've just reviewed the medical records for the last 6 months. We had 3 deaths in the nursery that were attributed to natural complications. But now," Lauren felt her heart squeeze. "Do you think the deaths are related to the adulterated drugs?" Marcus nodded gravely. "The 3 babies showed similar symptoms to those Ryan had yesterday. At the time, we attributed it to the fragility of premature babies. But looking back, the silence that followed was as heavy as lead." Lauren thought of the families of those babies, of the grief they bore without knowing the true cause of their child's loss. "This changes everything," Madeline declared, picking up her phone. "We're not just talking about fraud anymore. It's culpable homicide at the very least." Catherine, who was analyzing more documents, let out an exclamation. "I've found something." Dr. Pierce's emails show that he had a contact at the FDA, someone who ensured that inspections would never pick up adulterations. The investigation was expanding like a spider's web. revealing new connections by the hour. Lauren returned to the nursery to check on Ryan and the other babies. Rachel Matthews was there, cradling her son carefully. "The other mothers are asking," Rachel said softly. "They've seen the news. They're scared." Lauren took a deep breath, preparing for another round of difficult explanations. But before she could respond, an alert sounded on her cell phone. An urgent message from Madeline. Dr. Pierce was found unconscious in his cell. Possible suicide attempt. Alive, but in critical condition. The rest of the day turned into a whirlwind of events. While forensic teams scoured Pierce's office for more evidence, Lauren and Catherine worked tirelessly to ensure that every baby in the nursery received safe and adequate medication. "We need to think about the future," Marcus commented during a brief coffee break. "How are we going to rebuild people's trust in the hospital?" "One day at a time," Lauren replied, looking through the glass of the nursery at the little patients fighting for their lives. Starting with total transparency about what happened. As evening approached, more grim details emerged. The investigation uncovered offshore bank accounts, bribes paid to officials at various levels, and an elaborate system of document forgery. "The scariest thing," Madeline commented, showing more and more documents, "is that this could be happening elsewhere." MedTech Solutions has contracts with hospitals all over the country. Lauren looked at her sister, noticing the deep circles under her eyes. "How long before we can dismantle the whole operation?" "Weeks, maybe months," Madeline replied. "But every day that passes is a day when more lives are at risk. We can't slow down now." In the nursery, Ryan slept peacefully, his heart monitor showing stable vital signs. Lauren gently adjusted his blanket, thinking about how many other children in how many other hospitals could be receiving counterfeit drugs at that very moment. The truth was coming out, but the price would be high, in broken trust, in lives lost, in innocence destroyed. As she watched the sunset through the hospital window, Lauren knew that this would be just the first of many long nights in the search for justice. Minneapolis General Hospital had become an investigative fortress. Undercover police officers roamed the corridors. Extra security cameras were installed at strategic points, and an atmosphere of tension hung over every floor. Lauren watched all this through the nursery windows, where she continued her tireless vigil over the little patients. "We have news about Dr. Pierce," Madeline announced, entering the nursery with hurried steps. "He survived the suicide attempt, but he's refusing to talk. However, we found something interesting on the tablet he tried to destroy." Lauren gently moved away from Ryan's incubator, who was now sleeping peacefully. "What did you find?" "Videos," Madeline replied, lowering her voice. "Recorded meetings with MedTech Solutions executives. They weren't just selling counterfeit drugs. They were testing new, unapproved compounds on patients without consent." The horror of the revelation hit Lauren like a punch in the gut. They were using patients as guinea pigs? Exactly. And there's more. We found records of payments to employees in at least 12 different hospitals in 5 states. It's a much bigger operation than we first imagined. At that moment, Catherine rushed into the nursery, carrying a stack of documents. "You need to see this." I compared the medical records for the last 2 years with the records of adulterated medication. It wasn't just 3 deaths. We identified 17 suspected cases in a nursery alone. Lauren had to lean on the nearest wall, feeling her legs weaken. 17 babies? And those are just the cases we've been able to confirm so far, Catherine continued. There are dozens of others with unexplained complications that may be related. Madeline's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. After a few tense moments, she hung up with a grave expression. "Angela Roberts has just had a visitor at the secure hospital. Someone posed as a nurse and tried to get into her room. Security intercepted the person. It was Carol Stevens, Dr. Pierce's secretary." "Carol?" Lauren exclaimed. "She's been working at the hospital for over 15 years. And apparently she was deeply involved in the scheme," Madeline explained. "We found a flash drive hidden in her house with detailed spreadsheets of all the payments and drug substitutions." Marcus Chun entered the nursery, his tense face reflecting the gravity of the situation. "I've just left a meeting with the hospital board. They're panicking. The lawsuits have already started coming in, 3 families filed this morning. Lauren watched the babies sleeping in their incubators, each one a precious life that had been put at risk by greed and cruelty. How are we going to tell all these families? The hospital is setting up a special communications and psychological support team, Marcus replied. But the damage to the institution's reputation could be irreparable. The hospital's reputation is the least of our problems, Madeline intervened. We need to focus on ensuring that all those responsible are brought to justice. Catherine, who was reviewing more documents, let out a surprised exclamation. I found something. In Carol's records, there are mentions of a warehouse on Oakland Avenue. It seems they kept a parallel stock of drugs there. I'll send a team immediately, Madeline replied, already picking up her phone. If we can prove that they were keeping an illegal warehouse. Lauren! Rachel Matthews' urgent voice interrupted the discussion. The young mother was standing in the nursery doorway, holding an envelope. I just got this on my cell phone. It's a video of Jennifer Martinez talking about Ryan. Everyone gathered around Rachel's cell phone. In the video, Jennifer appeared visibly distraught, confessing her participation in the scheme, but also revealing shocking new details about deliberate experiments with dosages on specific babies. She's saying that they chose the most vulnerable babies on purpose, Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face, to test the limits of counterfeit drugs. Lauren hugged Rachel while Madeline copied the video for forensic analysis. Jennifer's confession would be key to the case, but the emotional toll on the affected families was devastating. We need to protect these families now more than ever, Lauren declared, her voice firm despite her emotion. Not just legally, but emotionally. They need to know that they are not alone in this. The rest of the evening turned into a race against time. While Madeline coordinated the operation at the uncovered warehouse, Lauren and Marcus worked tirelessly to review each potentially affected case. Catherine continued her meticulous search for more evidence in the hospital records. At midnight, Madeline returned with news from the warehouse. We found everything: boxes and boxes of counterfeit drugs, counterfeit equipment, documents. It's the definitive proof we needed. Lauren observed the silent nursery, where Ryan and the other babies slept, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. The truth was emerging, but the road to justice and healing would still be long and painful. What happens now? Rachel asked softly, still cradling Ryan in her arms. Now, Lauren replied, we make sure it never happens again. Not in any hospital. The night wore on, but no one thought of resting. There was too much work to be done, too many truths yet to be revealed, and too many families in need of answers and justice. The rising sun cast long shadows over Minneapolis General Hospital as Lauren Crawford watched the unusual movement in the parking lot. Police cars and media cars alternated at the main entrance, creating a mosaic of red and blue lights that reflected in the building's windows. The FBI has just arrived, Madeline informed us, entering the nursery with determined steps. They took jurisdiction of the case after we discovered that the scam spanned 5 states. MedTech Solutions had a much larger network than we realized. Lauren gently adjusted Ryan's oxygen tube before turning to her sister. What's the real extent of the damage? The preliminary figures are devastating, Madeline replied, consulting her tablet. More than 2,000 patients affected in 12 different hospitals. 243 suspected deaths, 46 of them in nurseries. And those numbers keep rising. Catherine rushed in, carrying a pile of documents. You need to see this. We've just deciphered Dr. Pierce's encrypted files. He kept a detailed diary of experiments. That's what he called them. The 3 women pored over the documents, each page revealing greater horrors than the last. Pierce had systematically selected vulnerable patients to test different formulations of counterfeit drugs, meticulously documenting their reactions. He deliberately chose premature babies, Lauren whispered, her voice shaking with anger. He said they were ideal subjects because of their compromised immune systems. Marcus Chon appeared in the doorway, his normally serene face marked by concern. Jennifer Martinez has just made a full confession. She's cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. What did she reveal? Madeline asked, already reaching for a notepad. MedTech Solutions wasn't just a counterfeit drug company, Marcus explained. They were using hospitals as clandestine laboratories to test new drugs. Drugs that had been rejected by the FDA because they were too dangerous for human testing. Lauren felt her legs go weak and had to lean on the nearest incubator. Rachel Matthews, who had just entered the nursery to visit Ryan, overheard the last part of the conversation. "My son. Did they use my son as a guinea pig?" Her voice was just a broken whisper. "Rachel," Lauren began, but was interrupted by the sound of her phone. It was the FBI forensics team. "Dr. Crawford, we found something at the Oakland Avenue warehouse that you need to see in person." The site, an old industrial warehouse on the outskirts of the city, had been transformed into an FBI operations center. Dozens of agents were cataloging evidence, while Lauren and Madeline were guided to a back room. "These are the original MedTech records," explained Agent Lisa Morgan, pointing to several boxes of documents. They kept 2 sets of books, one for the authorities and one with the actual data from the experiments. The next few hours were spent reviewing documents that painted an increasingly bleak picture. The operation wasn't just about profit. There was a perverse systematization of unauthorized human experimentation. Back at the hospital, Lauren found Catherine and Marcus organizing an emergency meeting with all the affected families. The auditorium was packed, anxious faces seeking answers. "We're not going to hide anything from you," Lauren began, her voice firm despite her emotion. "Every family has the right to know exactly what happened to their loved ones." As the truth was revealed, a mixture of weeping and cries of outrage echoed through the auditorium. Lauren watched as Rachel Matthews hugged other mothers, sharing her pain and strength. "What happens now?" someone asked from the back of the room. "Justice," Madeline replied, standing up. "The FBI is putting together one of the biggest public health crime cases in recent history. Every single person involved will be held accountable." In the days that followed, the arrests continued. MedTech Solutions executives were arrested in different states. FDA officials who had been bribed to ignore irregularities were exposed. The web of corruption and cruelty unraveled like an endless ball of yarn. Lauren kept her vigil in the nursery, watching Ryan and the other babies who had survived. Each small victory, one baby breathing on its own, another starting to feed normally, was celebrated as a triumph over the evil that had almost destroyed them. "We found 17 more warehouses like the one on Oakland Avenue," Madeline reported during one of her regular visits to the nursery. "This investigation will last for years." "But children can't wait years," Lauren replied, adjusting the heart monitor of one of the babies. "We need to make sure something like this never happens again." The hospital has implemented new security protocols. Cameras were installed in all medication areas. Each dose was checked by multiple professionals. Trust would need to be rebuilt brick by brick. "You know what's ironic?" Catherine commented, organizing the new medication protocols. "This whole scheme started with someone wanting to save money. In the end, the cost in lives and trust was incalculable." Lauren watched the sunset through the nursery windows, thinking of all the families affected, all the lives altered forever. The anonymous note she had found in Ryan's incubator had only been the beginning of a journey that exposed the darkness capable of hiding in the most unlikely places. "Aunt Lauren," Rachel's soft voice brought her back to the present. "Ryan's smiling today. And he was small, fragile, but a fighter. Ryan had survived not only his prematurity, but also human cruelty. His smile was a reminder that, even in the darkest moments, hope finds a way to shine through." The truth had been costly, but its price was necessary. As the day drew to a close at Minneapolis General Hospital, Lauren knew that the fight for justice and safety in hospitals had only just begun. But looking at Ryan and the other babies in her care, she was sure that every battle was worth it.